A new lesbian love story, a tender bond between farmer and veterinarian. The storm came without warning that October evening, tearing through the valley with a fury that seemed to mirror the chaos in Maya Chin's heart. She stood in the doorway of her barn, watching sheets of rain obliterate the landscape she'd worked so hard to cultivate, and felt something inside her crack open, not from the storm, but from 3 years of holding everything together alone. Her organic farm, once her dream, had become her prison. The woman who'd promised to build this life with her had left 18 months ago, taking not just her belongings, but Maya's ability to trust that love could ever be anything more than a beautiful lie. Now Maya worked 16-hour days, buried herself in soil and sweat, and told herself that the ache in her chest was just exhaustion, nothing more. The crash came from the far pasture, a sound that cut through even the howling wind. Maya's heart seized. The goats. She grabbed her raincoat and ran into the deluge, her boots sinking into mud with every step. When she reached the old oak tree, she found Clover, her pregnant doe, lying on her side beneath a fallen branch, eyes wide with pain and terror. Maya dropped to her knees, hands shaking as she assessed the damage. The branch had struck Clover's hindquarters, and the doe was bleeding, trembling. Maya had delivered dozens of kids over the years, had nursed sick animals back to health, but this was beyond her. The nearest large animal vet was Dr. Patterson, and he was 73 and half deaf. There was no way he'd make it out in this storm. Then she remembered the flyer she'd seen at the feed store last week. A new veterinarian had opened a practice just outside town. Dr. Sarah Reeves. Mobile services available. Maya pulled out her phone with trembling fingers, water streaming down her face, and dialed the number. The voice that answered was calm, warm, with an edge of steel that spoke of someone who didn't scare easily. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Dr. Reeves said. And something in those words made Maya believe her. She stayed with Clover, whispering reassurances she didn't feel, watching the road through the rain until headlights finally cut through the darkness. Sarah Reeves emerged from her truck like she'd been born to weather storms, tall and solid, with strong hands and eyes the color of summer rain. She moved with a quiet confidence that made the chaos seem suddenly manageable. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Within minutes, she'd assessed Clover's injuries, administered pain medication, and begun the careful work of examining the unborn kids. Maya watched those hands move with such gentleness, such absolute certainty, and felt something shift in her chest that had nothing to do with relief about her goat. Sarah worked for over an hour in the rain and mud, never once complaining, never once suggesting they move somewhere dry. When she finally looked up and met Maya's eyes, there was mud on her cheek and exhaustion in her smile, but also something else, a recognition that felt like coming home. Clover survived. So did her twin kids, born 3 weeks later with Sarah present to ensure everything went smoothly. Sarah started finding reasons to stop by the farm, checking on the goats, she said, though Maya suspected it was more than that. They'd talk while Sarah examined the animals, conversations that started professional and drifted into personal territory neither of them seemed able to resist. Sarah had moved to the valley to escape a painful divorce, Maya learned. Her ex-husband had wanted children, a white picket fence, a wife who'd put her career second. Sarah had tried to be that person, had twisted herself into shapes that weren't her own, until she'd finally admitted a truth she'd been running from since college. She wasn't attracted to men at all. The divorce had been brutal. She'd lost friends, faced judgment from her family, rebuilt her entire life from scratch at 42. Maya found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone, not just about her ex-girlfriend's betrayal, but about the deeper wound beneath it, how she'd always felt like too much and not enough at the same time, too ambitious, too independent, too unwilling to soften her edges for someone else's comfort. Her ex had loved the idea of farm life but hated the reality, the early mornings, the hard work, the endless demands. She'd wanted Maya to hire help, to spend less time in the fields and more time being the romantic partner she'd envisioned. When Maya couldn't be that person, couldn't abandon the land that fed her soul, her ex had found someone else, someone who worked a 9-to-5 job and had energy left over for candlelit dinners and weekend getaways. Maya had told herself the breakup was proof that she was meant to be alone, that love required sacrifices she wasn't willing to make. But Sarah didn't ask her to be anything other than what she was, When Maya apologized for having dirt under her fingernails during their first dinner together, a casual meal at Maya's farmhouse. After a long day, Sarah had laughed and held up her own hands, still bearing traces of the mud from treating a neighbor's horse. "I think we match," she'd said, and Maya had felt tears prick her eyes at the simple acceptance in those words. They began spending more time together, finding excuses that grew thinner and more transparent. Sarah would stop by to check on animals that didn't need checking. Maya would call with questions she already knew the answers to. They danced around their growing attraction for weeks, both afraid of what it might mean, both carrying too much hurt to move without caution. The turning point came on a December evening when Maya's irrigation system failed, catastrophically, flooding half her winter crops. She called Sarah without thinking, not because she needed a vet, but because Sarah was the person she wanted to hear when everything fell apart. Sarah arrived to find Maya sitting in the mud, surrounded by ruined lettuce and kale, crying for the first time since her ex had left. Not polite tears, but the ugly, gasping kind that came from a well too deep to measure. Sarah didn't try to fix it. She didn't offer platitudes or solutions. She simply sat down beside Maya in the cold mud, wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and held her while she broke apart. When Maya finally lifted her head, Sarah's eyes held such tenderness that Maya stopped breathing. "I'm falling for you," Sarah said quietly, the words barely audible over the sound of running water. "I've been trying not to. I keep telling myself it's too soon, that we're both too damaged, that I should give us both more time. But I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of protecting myself from good things because I'm afraid they'll turn bad." Maya stared at her. This strong woman who'd driven through a storm to help a stranger's goat, who'd rebuilt her entire life after admitting a truth that cost her everything, who looked at Maya's mud-stained overalls and early morning routines and saw something worth falling for. "I'm scared," Maya whispered. "I'm so scared of doing this wrong again." "So am I," Sarah admitted. "But I think the wrong thing would be walking away from this because we're afraid. I think we've both been alone long enough." She cupped Maya's face in her hands, thumbs gentle against tear-stained cheeks. "I don't need you to be anything other than exactly this. A woman who loves her land, who works until her hands bleed, who cries when her crops fail. I don't want candlelit romance if it means you have to pretend. The farm doesn't come first sometimes. I want the real thing. The messy, complicated, beautiful real thing." When their lips finally met, Maya tasted salt and rain and something that felt like permission to be entirely herself. The kiss was soft and careful, weighted with all the hurt they'd both carried and the tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, love didn't have to mean losing yourself. They took it slow, building their relationship in the spaces between their work. Sarah would bring coffee to the farm at dawn and help Maya feed the animals before starting her rounds. Maya would pack lunch for them both and meet Sarah at difficult farm calls, offering an extra pair of hands and moral support. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's wounds, each other's dreams. Sarah understood that Maya couldn't always drop everything for spontaneous dates, that harvest season meant 16-hour days and exhaustion that went bone deep. Maya understood that Sarah's work came with emergencies and heartbreak, that some animals couldn't be saved no matter how skilled the veterinarian. They built a love that had room for both their lives, that didn't demand either of them shrink to fit. There were challenges. Maya's ex showed up unexpectedly one spring afternoon, saw Sarah's truck in the driveway, and made a scene that left them both shaken. She accused Maya of moving on too quickly, of replacing her like she'd never mattered. The words reopened wounds Maya thought had healed, made her question whether she'd processed her grief properly or simply buried it under work and new love. Sarah held her that night while she cried and raged and doubted everything, and then said something that changed everything. "You're allowed to move forward. Healing isn't linear. You're allowed to have found happiness again, without it meaning you didn't hurt before." The permission in those words, the understanding that she could hold both grief and joy, freed something in Maya's chest that had been locked tight. Sarah faced her own demons. When her parents visited and struggled to accept that their daughter's new partner was a woman, and that Sarah was truly permanently gay, not going through a phase or acting out after her divorce. The dinner was awkward and painful, full of carefully worded questions that felt like judgment. Maya watched Sarah navigate it with grace she didn't feel, saw the way her hands shook when her mother asked if she'd considered that maybe she just hadn't met the right man yet. After they left, Sarah broke down, admitting how much she'd hoped her parents would surprise her, would choose love over discomfort. Maya held her the way Sarah had held her, offering the same quiet strength, the same unwavering presence. "Family is what we build," Maya said softly, "and we're building something pretty incredible here. If this story is touching your heart, if you believe in second chances and love that sees us for who we truly are, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to find your person. Your support helps these stories reach others who might be searching for hope." A year into their relationship, they stood together at the farmer's market where Maya sold her organic produce. Sarah had taken the day off to help, and they worked side by side, laughing with customers, sneaking kisses when they thought no one was looking. An elderly woman approached their stand, studied them for a long moment, then smiled. "You two remind me of my late wife and me," she said. 53 years we had together. Started our own farm back when people didn't talk about women like us. The love that grows from shared work, from building something together. That's the kind that lasts. She bought a bouquet of flowers and pressed them into Sarah's hands. "Don't let the world convince you that love has to look a certain way. The best kind is the kind that lets you both bloom." Maya and Sarah planted a garden together that summer, mixing vegetables with flowers, practical with beautiful, creating something that was entirely theirs. They worked in comfortable silence sometimes, in animated conversation others, finding a rhythm that felt like coming home. The farm flourished under their combined care, Maya's expertise and Sarah's scientific knowledge, creating something neither could have built alone. They talked about the future, about Sarah moving into the farmhouse officially, about maybe expanding the livestock operation or adding a veterinary clinic on the property. Dreams that felt possible because they were dreaming them together. On the anniversary of the storm that brought them together, Maya led Sarah to the old oak tree where Clover had nearly died. A new bench sat beneath it now, carved with both their names. "I was so broken when you came into my life," Maya said, voice thick with emotion. "I thought I was done with love, done with trusting anyone to see me and stay. But you showed me that the right person doesn't ask you to be smaller. The right person helps you grow." Sarah pulled her close, kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "You saved me too," she whispered. "You gave me a place to be entirely myself. You gave me home. Before I ask you to do something special, I want you to know that stories like Maya and Sarah's exist all around us. Quiet, beautiful love stories that don't always make headlines, but change everything for the people living them. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that love can find us even after heartbreak, even when we've given up hope, please leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Tell me what this story meant to you, or share a word of encouragement for anyone reading who might be searching for their own tender bond. They stood together under the oak tree as the sun set. Two women who'd found each other in the middle of their own storms and built something strong enough to weather anything. Maya's farm thrived. Sarah's practice grew. But more than that, they thrived not despite their scars, but because they'd found someone who saw those scars and loved them anyway. The vegetables grew in neat rows. The animals grazed peacefully. And in the farmhouse kitchen, 2 coffee cups sat side by side every morning, steam rising in the dawn light, a small domestic poetry that spoke of belonging. They'd both learned that love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone whose imperfections fit with yours, whose dreams had room for yours, whose hand you wanted to hold while you built something real. And in that knowing, in that choosing each other every single day, they'd found something neither had believed possible anymore. A love that felt like home, a bond tender enough to hold their wounds and strong enough to help them heal. A future bright with possibility and rooted in the rich soil of acceptance, partnership, and hope.